Every time that we hold this prestigious lecture, I have such warm memories of late Mr. Annan, the former UN Secretary General. He was such an incredible leader, a great mentor to me personally. His life was exemplary. His leadership was endearing and inclusive, and his wisdom, calmness, and thoroughness and forthrightness always got all of us to reflect deeply on issues, question long-held assumptions on positions, all with our eyes focused on improving the conditions around the world. Whether it was the Sustainable Development Goals, global security issues, conflicts, global pandemics, food insecurity, governance, his voice will always resonate. Now, one of Kofi Annan's quotes that is apt for today that I like very much says, and I quote him, "We need to create a world that is equitable, that is stable, a world where we bear in mind that the needs of others and not only what we need matters immediately. We are all in the same boat," and he went on to aptly put it, "one leak in the boat and we all sink together." The challenges of our world today, from COVID-19 pandemic, climate change, rising debt, food insecurity, and conflicts, are keeping the lead on development globally. The global development boat is leaking, and the consequences will be devastating unless we seal the leaking areas. At the top of the leakage is climate change, which poses existential risks for the world. We must do all we can to keep global warming at no more than 1.5 degrees Celsius. We need innovations to power the world better with renewable energy. Another leakage, there's too much hunger in the world. It is not acceptable that over 2.3 billion people in the world go to bed hungry every single day. God did not create stomachs to go empty. He created them to be filled. There must be a hunger-free world. Another leakage, inability to cope with global health pandemics. The COVID-19 pandemic has taught us how important it is to have global pandemic preparedness and to ensure no one is left behind in access to affordable health care. After all lives matter, for the rich and for the poor. The United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres recently raised the alarm that the world is off course on meeting the Sustainable Development Goals, our SDGs, our collective agreement to shape a better world for all. A better world for 940 million people that are without electricity in the world. A better place for 3 billion people without clean cooking energy, the majority of those being women, with millions and their children die due to inhaling smoke from just trying to cook a decent meal that we all take for granted. A better world for 2 billion people without access to clean water and 4.5 billion people without access to sanitation. A better world for 1.7 billion people without access to basic finance, credit, savings, payments, or insurance. A better world, I must say, for 240 million children that are out of school, including 129 million girls. Yet, this is all happening in the midst of stupendous wealth in the world. Total assets under management by institutional investors will soon reach $145 trillion US. Inequalities are expanding rapidly. Oxfam International put out a press release on the 13th of January of this year with a screaming headline. The richest 1% bag nearly twice as much as wealth as the rest of the world put together over the past 2 years. Just think about that. They continued. They grabbed nearly 2/3 of all new wealth worth $42 trillion created since 2020. The challenge facing the world is therefore not lack of resources. It is that the resources are highly concentrated in developed countries with few extremely rich around the world, while the world's development boat is leaking. The international community has a critical role to play to change this. Yet, as Kofi Annan reminds us in one of his statements, and I quote, "The international community allows nearly 3 billion people, almost half of all humanity, to subsist on $2 or less a day in a world of unprecedented wealth." In Africa, development financing needs are huge and widening. The African Development Bank estimates that Africa needs a financing gap of $1.2 trillion through 2030 to finance the SDGs and to adapt to climate change. For example, the financing requirements for Africa's nationally determined contributions under the Paris Climate Agreement are estimated at $277 billion annually through 2030. Current flows of climate finance to Africa fall way short of that, at just $30 billion in 2019 and 2020. Much of the available climate finance is concentrated in a few developed countries, and very little is available in support of climate adaptation, which is, of course, Africa's most serious challenge. There is no doubt, therefore, that the global financial architecture is failing development in the world as it faces multiple global challenges. The global financial architecture needs to be reformed and transformed to tackle more effectively global challenges and to accelerate the achievement of sustainable development goals. We must ensure equal opportunities for all. Regardless of one's economic, social, or racial background, we must create a level playing field for a more just, fair, and equitable world. Multilateral development banks like ourselves play a unique role of tackling global development challenges. By their nature, they are positioned to respond to global economic shocks, finance the needs of sustainable development goals, address rising fragility, and mobilize financing required to address climate change. It is estimated that the new global challenges will require a tripling of financing for multilateral development banks and a doubling of bilateral aid, a significant increase in concessional lending, and a massive increase, in particular, in inflows of private capital. The clarion call is from billions of dollars to trillions of dollars. The G20 has called for significantly raising the ambition of multilateral development banks, expanding resources for them to do more, improving their ability to take risks, optimizing their balance sheets, deploying more financial innovations, and leveraging the private sector. Critically, they need to work collectively as a system to effectively deploy knowledge, risk mitigation instruments, and concessional financing at scale. And that's why we have selected the theme of the 2023 Kofi Annan Eminent Speaker Lecture to be the changing global financial architecture, implications for multilateral development banks post-COVID-19. This topic is timely, and this lecture comes just a week after the World Bank IMF annual meetings in Marrakesh, Morocco, the first time in 50 years since the two global financial institutions held their annual meetings on the continent. A month ago also, the discourse on the global development financial architecture was at the heart of our discussions at the United Nations General Assembly in New York. There is, ladies and gentlemen, no better person to speak on this issue than our eminent speaker today, Dr. Jim Young Kim. Dr. Kim is a globally respected leader. He served as the 12th president of the World Bank Group from 2012 to 2019. He is currently the vice chairman and partner at the Global Infrastructure Partners, a fund that invests across the world in infrastructure. As president of the World Bank Group, Dr. Kim embarked on major reforms and shaped and reshaped, I must say, the vision of the bank to focus on two critical issues: ending extreme poverty and achieving shared prosperity. Under his incredible leadership, the World Bank invested heavily in education, in health, in pandemic preparedness and prevention, and also on infrastructure. Dr. Kim served as the president of the Dartmouth College, United States of America, as professor in public health at Harvard University, and he was earlier a director at the World Health Organization. He co-founded what's called the Partners in Health, an NGO dedicated to health. He's well known for his pioneering work on the treatment of HIV/AIDS, and what they call the 3x5 initiative, which was acclaimed for being the first effort to globally tackle HIV/AIDS. Beyond his global leadership and expertise, Dr. Kim is a great friend of Africa. As president of the World Bank, he prioritized Africa. Jim, of course, is a personal friend of mine. He and I traveled together, I wish we had the photos to show for it, to Ghana, and we dressed, I think, Mailo, you were there then at that time in Ghana. We dressed in kente dress as twin brothers when we went to Ghana. Then was President John Mahama was president of Ghana. Jim epitomizes how multilateral development banks should work together. When I was seeking for general capital increase of the bank, we traveled all the way to Korea for that meeting, and I needed to get some support. Jim was president of the World Bank Group, got on a plane, and flew all the way from Washington to Korea. He came to Korea, Busan. He addressed all the shareholders. He made a very passionate case for the African Development Bank to get a general capital increase. And he said, well, Akin is actually doing quite a lot of reforms, more than I was doing at the World Bank, so you should give him more money. And of course, I was quite delighted. He finished the meeting, he got on his plane, and he flew right back to Washington. And of course, our shareholders eventually gave us that capital increase. And just tells you a lot about the person. He showed commitment to Africa, commitment to working together instead of competing. And I need to underline that in terms of working as a system, but also a commitment to a friend. Jim walked the talk. He is eminently qualified to speak to us, therefore, today about how the global financial architecture needs to be reformed and how the multilateral development banks need to work together as a system. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming my dear friend, our 2023 Kofi Annan Eminent Speaker, Dr. Jim Young Kim. Kim, over to you, Jim.